What's up, guys? Long time no see. Is Lady Eva in here already? Yeah. I was gonna say, I thought I heard you. No. Turn that down. I'm gonna turn this down. Thank you. I'm doing some things and some stuff. You can only be here for a little while. We better get cracking. Thank you. I am doing okay. But in last week, thanks for sticking with me. I know I didn't go live last week. I got my flu vaccine and my COVID vaccine on the same day, which I needed to get them both, and I've been putting them off, and then I caught COVID, and so then I was like, well, I better do this now. So I did them both at the same time. You're gonna miss the next 2 lives. Oh shit. I'll have to make sure to get them uploaded pronto. I'm finishing up the last of this coffee. Thank you. I'm doing some different things with my face. Hi, Dad. My dad's in here. Heavily medicated. Not just medicated, but also heavily. Alright, well, hopefully you can sort of stick around for a little bit. If you gotta go, though, I completely understand you guys. Life happens. Have dinner with your old horse trainer in a bit. Oh, snap. Well, have fun? Is that a good thing? Is that mediocre? Neutral? Obligations. I never know. It keeps freezing for you. I hope my connection's okay. I'm connected to the Wi-Fi. Somewhat okay. Alright. You tell me I gotta go out to dinner with anybody. It could be somebody I like and enjoy, and I'd still be like, seems sus. Okay, I was gonna say, is it freezing for everybody or just one person? Glad y'all could make it. I know some people gotta leave, and that's cool. Stuff happens, but I'm gonna upload it on YouTube, so y'all can hop in later and see what's up on the YouTube. Oh, snap. Maybe it's just your internet connection. I know some places it's not great. Oh, sweet. Hi. This is for me. That was your own Wi-Fi. Yeah. I know for like a while we didn't have Wi-Fi and my connection was super bad. I kept trying to go live and it did not want to connect for anybody, so... Yeah, so, if you notice, I haven't been uploading videos as regularly, and, I'm kind of bummed about it, but I'm also, okay with it, I guess, for the time being, because I'm learning how to do a lot of new stuff, and I got a lot of stuff that I'm working on. This is unrelated to the stuff I've been doing. This is just, this was... Forget about this. Don't even look at this. Don't even think about looking at this. No. This isn't part of it, but I've been learning how to do a lot of new editing stuff that I want to do for Johannes. I've been working on Johannes. I have different makeup ideas for Johannes, different wig ideas for Johannes I want to try out. I am also going to be doing a whole new cosplay soon. Not Johannes, it's a different anime cosplay that I've also really wanted to do for a really long time. So I've been putting a lot of energy into making my content itself better instead of just uploading stuff all day, like every day. So I've been taking the month of February to kind of take a step back and reevaluate what I'm doing and see what I want to do and what I'm happy doing. Just so I can enjoy my content a little bit more, and hopefully so you can enjoy it a little bit more. So that's what's been going on. So if I've been out of the mix for a little bit and you're like, this is a dead account, it's not dead. It's not dead. It's just sleeping. It's taking a nap, taking a power nap, and then I'll be back better and stronger. Hopefully, and you guys will enjoy that. I don't know if the cosplays I'm gonna do, because I have actually 3 separate cosplays I'm working on right now. There's Johannes, which you know about, and then there's 2 other ones that you don't know about. Possibly 3 if the wig comes in. So get ready for that. And I'm also redoing my adult pro hero Shinzo. I'm gonna do him completely different. I have some different ideas that I'm gonna do with him, his makeup, his outfit, his hair, everything. Nothing is safe. I'm reevaluating everything. So stay tuned, hopefully, if you want to, obviously. I've had 7 people unsubscribe from me in the past week. I told you this wasn't a platform. No, yes, I was like, people think this is a dead account, because I never made any sort of I was like, nobody will notice that I'm gone. I was like, nobody will notice that I haven't uploaded anything. Oh, thanks, Thorny. Thank you so much, Thorny. I appreciate that. I was like, nobody will notice that I'm gone for like a month. Like, no one's gonna notice. Some people noticed. Some people noticed and got anxious. Which, that's my thing. I'd appreciate it if you'd take a step back. No, I'm joking. I'm not gatekeeping anxiety. That's a bad look. No test. Yeah, you all noticed. So I was like, oh man, I really did kind of alarm a couple people. I didn't mean to. I was just like, I'm so excited about all my things. And, no, I'm alive. I swear I'm alive. I'm busy doing stuff. I figured out how to do a lot of editing stuff that I've really wanted to do for Johannes for a while. I want to go thrift shopping and see if I can pick up, hopefully, one of the other items that I want for the cosplay. And I have more stuff I need to shoot, more stuff I need to learn how to do things so I can shoot it. It's a whole big thing. It's a whole deal. And there's some stuff that I don't even know how to start to be able to accomplish it. And I'm like, how am I going to do that? And I'm like, bruh. So I've been Googling a lot of stuff and learning how to do things that I think is going to be really cool, especially for Johannes, because there's a lot of shots that I want to do that I'm like, but I don't want to do this particular thing. That's terrible. You can't just waltz up in a cemetery and start filming in someone's crypt. You can't be doing that. So I'm learning how to do some stuff. And I'm having fun doing it. But I knew it was going to take a bit of a time off, and I'm sorry if I alarmed anybody, made people think I was dead. I'm not dead. Not on this side of my face, anyway. Ignore the other side. I don't know. That's a haunted forest. Forget about it. But I appreciate everybody who's stuck with me and supported me and been super nice about it, and not like... It's kind of a relief to be able to, like, do something else and not have people go, like, well, where's Shinzo? You know what I mean? And I love Shinzo. I love Shinzo. Don't get me wrong. He's alright. But I do kind of want to do other stuff, you know? And I like to be able to have the freedom to do those things and know that, you know, some people are going to support me. At least, so that's kind of cool. So anyway, that's my PSA. Variety is the spice of life. Thank you. You can't always call me Toshi, though. Everybody has just taken to calling me Toshi. Not even just in this live. Like, my coworkers all know me as Toshi. It's real wild. No, everyone calls me Toshi now. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's super weird. I don't know what I did to have super awesome people backing me up all the time. I think next week I am going to get that P.O. box, though, so that's good. It's been kind of hectic this week, so I haven't been able to do it, but, and we're going somewhere tomorrow. So we're going on a little trip. But yeah, I'm probably going to get that P.O. box next week, and I'm looking forward to it. Because I know a lot of people have, like, coffee they want to send me, some tea or something. I don't know. I've tricked you all. No. Oh, that's alright. We understand. Life happens. You can check me out on YouTube and finish and hear the entire story that you missed out on. I'm glad y'all like me. That's cool. I don't know how, but I appreciate it. Now, to business. I uploaded chapter 4. We got cut off halfway through chapter 4 and the week before last. Do you want me to reread chapter 4 and start on chapter 5 and do chapter 5, or would you rather I pick up on chapter 5 and read through chapter 6 and leave everyone else to be really confused about where chapter 4 is if they haven't checked out the YouTube? Because honestly, I'm only talking to the book club peeps. If you're new and you don't know what we're talking about, you're late to the game. Catch up. Go to the YouTube. It's in my bio, my TikTok bio. You just hit it. Whole story is there. A load of content for you. Put it on while you go to sleep. I'm apparently relaxing and I put people to sleep. Coffee, tea, be prepared. I will. I love coffee. And I'm running out. I have to make another coffee order soon. And I was going to make my order, the one that you sent me, the Coffee Shop of Horrors. And then some more of the fire department coffee. Honestly, Insomniac recommended that to me. Chef's kiss. That shit is so good. If you make, if you ever get their donut collection, you make the, it's like the apple pie donut or whatever as an espresso shot. It's really good. Pack it. It's not technically like fine enough for you to use it for that, but I do, and it's great. Alright, chapter 4. Johannes gets on an airship, figures out that he has to go to a mandatory captain's dinner. He hates it. Leonie Barrow is there. He absolutely does not expect that. She threatens that she's going to turn him into the authorities once they reach Senza. They have awkward small talk with another couple, and then dinner is announced. That's chapter 4. That stuff is so good. I'm so excited. You already got a mug for me. Aw, I love mugs. You know I love mugs. I can't say no to a mug. Oh man, one of my coworkers the other day was telling me, they were like, I think I found something that's up your alley. And I'm always like, you don't know me. Like, you know what I mean? With people that I work with. I'm like, you don't know what I like. Don't presume to know me. You know little information about me. But they were like, I saw a coffee mug that was like shaped like Cthulhu. And I'm like, okay, you're right. That is me. Where did you find it? And where can I get it? Like, where's the background? I needs it in my life. What background? Which one? The steampunk one? Which one? Same. Yeah, oh man, I have to send you a picture. I haven't uploaded it on Instagram yet, Jake, but I'm probably gonna, I took some pictures with it. You'll really like the pictures. I gotta send them to you. I'll have Dave send you a copy of the ones that we shot with the background because I'm really excited about them. They came out looking fantastic. I was gonna probably release like a couple teaser images for the Discord because y'all my buds. They're the book club. They help fund this adventure. And then I'm probably going to release the full set on my Instagram probably before the end of February, right at the head of March, because I didn't want to release them and then not post Johannes content. So by the time I get them uploaded on Instagram is when I'm going to finally upload all the Johannes content on here. So, yeah, stick around. But I'll have Dave send you a couple of the ones that we shot with the background you sent. Yeah, I was really excited to shoot those, and they came out looking pretty awesome. And that background works really well, especially for this book set, and also Fear Institute pretty well. And also House of Gears, so I might do some House of Gears stuff too. I don't know. That's another short story further on in the future. Yeah, we did a photo shoot. We did. Me, Layla, and Horst all did a photo shoot. They came out really well. 2 shots in particular are my favorite. God, Layla's came out super good, and I'm gonna need you all to be not super thirsty. That is my coworker. It was already weird enough. She came up showing up like a whole you know, you saw the photo shoot. She was like, I can pull my whole leg behind my head. And I was like, I don't know about all that. But we took a bunch of shots with Layla. We got a few Horst and his dumbass root beer. We got some of me with the tickets, and also, yeah, it was crazy. So we had a whole lot of fun, like, shooting those pictures. So I hope y'all like the set we got for Instagram when we put them up. I'm going to give you a couple teaser images on the Discord before I release them on Instagram, though. And there's still some more to come. I still have some other stuff I want to shoot. Another backdrop, if I can get it. I do. I am so excited for some of the content that I'm going to shoot. If I can shoot it the way I want to. Some of them are going to be real fucking crazy. And I know, like, every single time you put a whole lot of effort into a video, you always sort of get this feeling like, this one's not going to do well. You post it, you put the most effort into it that you possibly can, and no one notices, and it gets like 50 likes, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, I guess. And then you post something that you filmed in 5 seconds that took no time, and then people eat it up, and you're like, ah. So I know in the back of my head, I'm like, don't make this your weird cinematic masterpiece. Don't do that, because the second you do that, no one's gonna care. That's a terrible way to think, but I do it all the time. I'm like, the more you care about something, the less everyone else is gonna care about it. But I do have like a whole big thing with actually like a really fun like crossover and some funny videos too. But like I have a whole video planned out that I was like really excited about it, that the minute I got the stuff to do Johannes, I was like, this is the video that is most important to me. And I started like planning it out in my head, and I actually need a few more things for it, but I think it's stuff that I can wrangle out of my own house. So, or I can thrift for most of it. Horst in his coat. Yeah, it was really funny because Horst left his coat at my house, and then I went and took it to him at work the next day, and I was like, oh, look at me. I'm Horst with my questionable fashion choices and unwavering moral compass. And he was like, take that off. It's my coat. I was like, yeah. And you left it in my place. So now, by the law of transversal, it's mine. And he was like, give it back. So yeah, I'm excited. I hope y'all are excited. I hope you like it when it comes out. But I gave you all the synopsis of chapter 4. So do you want to start chapter 5? Do we have a vote on that? Chapter 5? Absolutely not. If you want, you can get them the book series. It's probably going to be a while before they can really grasp a lot of the content. Or you can just put me on YouTube. I apparently read people to sleep. 5. Yes. Dope. Okay. We're going to read chapter 5. Everybody strap in. I got my beaker because I got water. Give me a list of the stuff you... Alright, Jake. Thanks. I appreciate your support, really. It's super weird that people want me to keep doing it. I appreciate it, Jake. Alright. Chapter 5. In which... Can y'all hear me okay really quick? Sound check. You got me? Alright. In which dinner is served and acquaintances are made. The same steward who had cleared up Cabal's spilt drink also seated him. The dinner was being held in the dining room at the ship's bow, the same room that Cabal had first entered when boarding. "Oh, there's so many more gentlemen than ladies on this voyage," he confided. "I'm afraid we're having to seat the men in twos, but at least every gentleman will have a lady to chat to." To Cabal's dismay, he realized that he was being placed next to Leonie Barrow. He sat down in silence and looked pointedly off to the middle distance. The steward, however, had not quite fulfilled his quota of mischief for the day. As he leaned over Cabal's shoulder to pour the wine, he whispered, "I took the liberty of seating you with this young lady." Cabal looked at him. The expression, "if looks could kill," does not begin to describe the pure corrosive abhorrence that he put into the glance. If, however, the steward had suddenly found himself transported far away and nailed through his genitals to the steeple of a church in the middle of a violent electrical storm, a more exact impression may be gained. The steward winked conspiratorially and moved along, pleased with his work. Cabal turned reluctantly to find Miss Barrow smiling, not altogether pleasantly at him. "I think we're the ship's official lovebirds," she murmured. Cabal, stony-faced, took his napkin, flicked it out, and placed it on his lap. "Imagine my delight," he said, apparently to his place-setting. Miss Barrow tapped his elbow and indicated the rest of the diners with a surreptitious gesture. Looking around, he saw that every single man there was tucking his napkin into his collar. Moving smoothly to avoid attracting attention, he picked up his and followed suit. "Don't bother thanking me," she whispered. Cabal growled slightly and ignored her. He was mentally kicking himself. He'd learned about this particular piece of etiquette during his stay in Krenz prior to the attempt at burglary that had ended in dog drool and disappointment. Now he'd allowed himself to get rattled, and it had slipped his mind. Johannes Cabal hated being rattled. It was so human. The first course was soup. Mercarvian taste predictably eschewed consommé in favor of something a little more masculine. Miss Barrow filled a spoon, but found that she couldn't bring it to her mouth without the specter of a gag reflex. "What is this stuff?" she whispered. She asked Cabal. "Oxtail?" "I'm not sure," he sniffed cautiously. They seemed not to have stopped with the ox's tail. "Possibly boiled bull's blood?" He fished around in the dark depths with a spoon. "With croutons." The next course was more acceptable. Poached fish, and Cabal took the opportunity to study some of his fellow passengers. The captain's table was actually a construct of all the dining tables in the room unbolted from the deck, rearranged into a squat oval, and bolted down again. Captain Sten held court from the middle of the forward long side, and very uncomfortable he looked in the roll, too. With Leonie Barrow to his left, Cabal was almost opposite the captain. Cabal watched without sympathy as Sten tried to look interested in what a self-made, self-satisfied, self-aggrandizing businessman was telling him about pork scratchings, the Bierkeller snack of the future. To Cabal's right sat a man in his mid to late 40s. His face seemed lived in, to the point of being second-hand, perhaps third. He was prodding his fish fitfully with the end of his knife, and it was hard to tell who was unhappier with the situation. The man noticed Cabal looking at him. "Poached," he said in a tone of defeated disgust. "Flippin' Nora, it would be poached. I thought, oh, your luck's in here, Alexei, my boy. Fish." He patted his stomach. "I'm a martyr to my guts. They ought to open an institute dedicated to the study of my guts. The Aloysius Casson Memorial Institute. It's traditional to be dead before having a memorial institution named after you," Cabal observed. "And how long can it be, eh? Murdered by my own internals." Cabal thought they would have to go back to the back of a long queue. "Still, if they're the death of me, perhaps medical science can study 'em and find a cure for my ills so that future generations can say, 'His sacrifice was not in vain.'" Cabal watched him carefully for any flicker of irony and found none. "Ills?" "Plural." Casson prodded his fish again. "That would have gone nice with a bit of batter. Oh, yes, I got a regular compendium of complaints. I have my doctors baffled. Baffled. Well, I say, 'Doctor,' I go to him, and he just sends me home with a milk of magnesia, and he tells me not to worry about it." His lip curled, and he sighed deeply, disgusted at the way of the world. The quack. Despite himself, Cabal was fascinated. He'd never met anybody so profoundly wrong before. "I was under the impression that poached fish was supposed to be good for the digestion." "Oh, well," said Casson with the wearied yet supercilious air of somebody who's put down that specious argument before. "They'd like you to think that, wouldn't they?" No further indication of who the mysterious conspiracy of "they" might be was forthcoming. The woman at Casson's other side started talking about how lovely it was to be away from that tiresome trouble back home, and Casson had opinions on that, too. Cabal was unsurprised to discover that Casson had been a tiger in his youth, a sergeant with the Grenadiers. "Clickety-snitch," he kept saying, to represent the pin being pulled, and the spoon springing clear of an armed grenade. Cabal found something almost touching in the man's self-belief, a faint tremor of empathy. Casson seemed to live in his own little world, and where the real one impinged upon it was always disappointing. Cabal looked around for other distractions. As the steward had intimated, the men outnumbered the women by a ratio of more than 2 to 1. From his own place and running clockwise, he let his gaze slide from diner to diner as a second hand sweeps a path around a watch. To his immediate left was Miss Leonie Barrow, and he regarded her with an outer dispassion and an inner sourness for a few seconds before moving on. On Miss Barrow's left was an old soldier, a brilliant deduction that Cabal based upon the man's no longer being young and his wearing an impressive collection of metal ribbons on the breast pocket of his dinner jacket. The fact that the captain had called him Colonel Constantine also helped. The dinner jacket in question was rather old-fashioned in style, featuring the sort of high collar normally seen only in regimental histories in these days of loud ties and ill-considered cufflinks. The colonel was also old-fashioned in his manners, attentive to the ladies and sober to the gentlemen. He nursed his wine slowly, waving away an increasingly distressed steward, who seemed to regard topping up glasses as a religious duty. Cabal was pleased that Constantine avoided war stories, and intrigued that he also avoided current affairs. "Is this your first flight, Colonel?" Captain Sten asked. In an aeroship, yes. I've been up the observer's seat of a few anemopters, though." He gestured vaguely with his fork. "This is a great deal more comfortable, Captain. She's a fine vessel." "You've flown in an anemopter?" said Miss Barrow. Constantine turned to her, and as he did so, his demeanor shifted slightly from that of a professional speaking to a professional to the pleasantly avuncular. "Indeed I have, Fraulein, and trust me when I say that this is a far more pleasant way to fly. I have had need to see the land from above on some occasions, and an anemopter reconnaissance was the best way of doing it. I am an infantryman, though, through and through, and I cannot tell you what a relief it was to set foot on terra firma once more." "Herr Meisner here used to be a cavalryman," said Miss Barrow. Cabal's fork stopped en route to his mouth. "Really?" Constantine regarded Cabal with a neutral stare. Then he smiled. "You would have broken your lances on one of my squares, sir, let me assure you." Cabal smiled. Too purely technical exercise. "I do not doubt it, Colonel," he replied without the faintest idea what Constantine was talking about. Next to the Colonel was a floppy-haired youth, which is to say, he was perhaps 5 or so years younger than Cabal. Cabal had, however, worked hard to cram such grotesque quantities of responsibility, activity, and learning, both theoretical and practical, into every one of his days, that his years became akin to dog years. This youth, whom, after muttering into his chest when questioned by the Colonel, Cabal had finally been able to name as one Gabriel Zorach, swung from moodiness to airs of unwarranted moral superiority, depending upon how out of his conversational depth he found himself. Cabal disliked him instinctively, having identified him as a man still prey to his hormones, while his intellect puttered around in the background like an embarrassed parent. He was dressed simply, but not cheaply, judging by the tailoring, and it seemed safe to assume that somewhere along the line he had decided to be a political activist, without regard for his painfully apparent lack of competence, knowledge, or acuity. It seemed that nice hair in the eyes of a cherub had gained him attentions that he had construed as somehow inspired by his political thoughts. In this he was mistaken, an air of the sort commonly found among millionaires who believe that they are charismatic. Beyond Zorach was Frau Rabarovsky, sitting apart from her husband, presumably as part of the etiquette of mixing. He was, to Cabal's right, 2 places beyond Casson, and apparently not enjoying his liberty to chat with strangers. This may well have been because of the proprietary glances she would occasionally shoot him if he showed any signs of coming out of a shell. Marriage, it seemed, was truly an institution, in this case, something along the lines of a prison or an asylum. Cabal avoided any eye contact with Frau Rabarovsky that might result in conversation and moved on. Captain Sten had managed to settle into a far more interesting conversation with the next man along, a gentleman in his 60s, whose taste in clothing was a trifle fusty, but whose eyes and manner were bright. "It's a fascinating vessel, Captain," he said, a piece of fish falling unnoticed from his fork back to his plate. "A fascinating vessel. I've been out of the job for a while, but you always keep your interest." "This isn't your first trip aboard an aeroship, then?" asked Sten, helping himself to more potatoes. "Oh, good heavens, no!" The man laughed in an indulgent manner of one about to make a revelation. "I used to design the things." "Really? You astonish me, Herr de Guerre." "Ah, please, Monsieur de Guerre, if you would. Herr de Guerre sounds a little too much like hurdy-gurdy." "Hurdy?" "One of those ghastly boxes that the English imagine as a musical instrument. Yes, I retired from aeronaval architecture. It must have been 7 years ago. You've heard of the Destrier class. That was one of mine." "Destrier?" Sten looked uncertain. "But that was a warship, was it not, monsieur?" "It was." De Guerre took a sip of wine. 3 were built. The Bucephalus was sold off for scrap about 5 years ago. The Marengo is now the entire aerial navy for some little republic in the tropics, and the Destrier herself plowed into a mountainside in bad weather. A few people listening in on the conversation showed mild signs of discomfort. Nobody likes to hear tales of aeroship disaster while traveling in one. I told them not to use that type of altimeter, but you know, military contractors, anything to save a few francs. He shook his head and picked up the piece of fish again. This time, there was no escape for it. And all three were used in the Désolé suppression, were they not, monsieur? Said a clear voice, cutting across all other conversations. Heads turned to look at the interjector. It was Gabriel Zorich, all dark-haired, clean-jawed, handsome, and probably riding for a fall. He looked, Cabal thought on further consideration, like the sort of man who does all the wrong things for all the right reasons. Cabal leaned back in his seat and, inclining his head towards her, asked Miss Barrow quietly, "What is the Désolé suppression?" She looked at him, suspicious of disbelief. "You're joking." "Not at this exact moment, no." "You've never heard of the Désolé suppression?" Cabal bit his lip and sought patience. "If I knew, I'd hardly be asking, would I?" He received no useful reply. She was no longer listening to him, but to the short exchange between Daguerre and Zorich. "I'll tell you later," she said offhandedly to Cabal, leaving him to stew. "Yes," said Daguerre, evenly and without rancor, "they were used in the suppression." "Your gleaming death machines," said the young man, showing an entirely unconscious attachment to the melodramatic turn of phrase. "Another mark of his breed," Cabal observed, "against women and children. Does that make you proud?" "Mynheer," began the captain, beginning to heat at this discourtesy. Daguerre interrupted him. "Monsieur, you're a romantic, no?" Zorich frowned, uncertain. "I was young once, too," continued Daguerre. "Things are pleasantly blanc and noir, are they not? All morality is a matter of certainty." Cabal glanced significantly at Miss Barrow, but she was listening attentively to the exchange. "The ships I built were intended for aerial warfare. Their every line proclaims it. Warship against warship. That was my brief, and that was my design. The suppression, as has been repeatedly shown and famously proclaimed, was the decision of an aeroflotilla commodore straying far, far beyond his orders. When he took those ships into a low-level attack against the villages of the Goussard Valley, he did so out of a rage of frustration. He had been sent to fight the partisans. They awkwardly did not wear uniforms. They did not simply vanish among the villagers. They were the villagers. They slaughtered patrols and then vanished among their kindred. It was an impossible situation and should never have been given to an aeroship flotilla to resolve. A case for the military, the infantry. Von Fox should have deployed his marines to provide as much and then reported it to his superiors. As we all know, he did not. It was regrettable." "Regrettable?" spat Zorich, but Daguerre hadn't finished. "The Destrier and her sisters were built to fight a good war by the rules of war, to the honor of war. Commodore von Fox sullied those rules. His family, and, to my chagrin, the reputation of my ships. Direct your ire elsewhere, monsieur. It is wasted here." He reached for his wine-glass and took a calm sip amidst a light patter of applause from other passengers who preferred that their war crimes not be discussed at dinner. Zorich glared at him, picked up his cutlery, and made as if to start eating again, but, after a moment's wavering, slammed them onto his plate, stood up, and walked out with less dignity than he supposed. Cabal watched him go with approval. Anything that distracted attention away from, say, a fugitive necromancer traveling abroad under the alias of a comatose civil servant was to be encouraged. "Stone the crows, what a Burke!" observed Casson. "Things were different when I was a boy. Respect your elders? Oh yes, always the same though, wasn't it? When you're young, you had to show respect for your elders or you get a right lathering. Now I am an elder, you have to treat the youth of today with kid gloves or they'll give you a right lathering. Doesn't matter which side of the generation gap I'm on, it's the wrong side." He breathed a deep breath so that he could sigh a deep sigh. "Typical. Absolutely flippin' typical." He shoved his plate of disrupted fish away from him. "Oi, Garcon, give this to the cat. What's for puddin'?" pudding, however, still a little way off into the future. The main course came next. Steak, cooked in the Mercarvian fashion, so rare as to be just this side of stationary. Miss Barrel looked at her plate as red juices oozed from the flesh. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she asked Cabal in an aside. "Eat it or resuscitate it?" "Thank your stars that you asked for it well done," he replied. He'd asked for his to be cooked medium rare, which in Mercarvian cuisine meant it had been shown a picture of an oven for a moment and then served. A very brief moment, mind. As his fellow diners had their full attention on their plates as they laboriously sawed away at their meals, less fine dining and more like a bayonet charge, Cabal took the opportunity to study them in greater detail. Sitting on the captain's left was a young woman, expensively yet unusually for the Mercarvian aesthetic, tastefully dressed in burgundy silks and velvet. This, it transpired, was the Lady Ninica, yet another of Mercarvia's serried ranks of nobles. Apparently she was quite senior, however, based on her place at table, and Sten's great and careful civility towards her. For her part, she was polite, but disengaged. The businessman with the major breakthrough in bar snacks, Herr Harleman, was on her left and had talked through her to Sten. She had disregarded him as easily as she might a small fly, a notable feat, in particular when Harleman had gone on to the intricacies of manufacture. In her early 20s, and beautiful in an obvious, flawless complexion, perfect bone structure, glittering eyes of russet brown, wine-dark hair sort of way, there was a slight downturn at the edges of her mouth that implied a dissatisfaction with life. It left her with a mild pout, but Cabal doubted there was much of the child left in her. Her gaze ranged around the table, and he found himself the subject of it more than once, her eyes switching between him and Miss Barrow, as if gauging the nature of their relationship, before moving on. When her eyes met his, there was no sudden looking away, or even glances laden with meaning. She looked dispassionately into his eyes, as she might those of a statue or an animal at the zoo. He noticed that she also looked occasionally at the door through which Gabriel Zorich, that singularly ineffectual rabble-rouser, had left earlier, as if expecting him to return. That he didn't seemed not to concern her greatly. To Cabal's side, Miss Barrow took a rest from her knife work. "This isn't a meal," she muttered to him. "It's a cow's post-mortem. I think I'll stick with the potatoes and carrots." She waved a steward over and asked for some more vegetables. The woman on the far side of Casson overheard her and said, "Ah, well, there's one thing we won't be short of on this voyage, my dear." She gave a curious laugh. "Wha-ha!" The "mwah" was low and slightly distressed, as if she were expressing illness, but the "huh" was higher and girlish. The overall effect was thus, "Mwah, I don't feel well. Huh, fooled you." Cabal turned to look at the woman, if only from curiosity at what sort of creature would produce such a sound. She was approximately 40, he gauged, and exhibited that interesting combination of dour propriety overlaying a coltishness inappropriate for a lady of her age. That was a peculiarly distinctive to women who have been in an English public school. Such schools begin the process of inculcating eccentricity right from the moment it is understood that English public schools are not meant for the public. The name is not merely inaccurate, it is actively misleading. Any other country would call these schools private, but where's the fun in that? She wore a dress that would be considered frumpy by most grandparents, a brown affair that carried a palpable air of spinsterhood. Her hair was very nearly the same shade, arranged in harsh shingles about her sharp, pale face. She had made an attempt at make-up, but the rouge sat on her cheeks like red paint on a white wall. "Why so?" he asked. "You don't know?" butted in Casson, whose tale's military veracity had gained some veracity in light of the horrible wounds he was inflicting on his food. "Blimey, mate, have you been living under a rock? This is a mission of mercy we're on here." Cabal said nothing, but his expression indicated that he had seen more likely angels than Casson. "The Catamenian famine, Herr Meisner," supplied Miss Barrow. "The crop failure?" Cabal might have had many faults, but difficulty in rapidly absorbing, reviewing, and extrapolating from new data was not among them. "Of course," he said nonchalantly, "my ministry has been working towards logistical relief programs, but I was not aware that the ship was involved." "It's why there are so few passengers aboard this vessel, sir," added the woman with the aggravating laugh. "Herr Meisner, was it?" Casson paused, with a chunk of meat speared alongside a fragment of boiled new potato and his fork hovering before his open mouth. It was not a pleasing tableau vivant. "Miss Ambersley, this is Herr Meisner of the Mercavian Civil Service. Herr Meisner, Miss Ambersley, her lady's companion." It looked as though he were introducing the meat and potato to each other. As an afterthought, he leaned slightly towards Cabal and said in a conspiratorial whisper, "She's English." This bombshell delivered, the etiquette satisfied, he dumped the food into his mouth with all the delicacy of a steam engine's fireman shoving coal into the firebox. Cabal turned his attention towards Miss Ambersley quickly, and that he might spare himself the sight of Casson chewing. "I'm sorry, you were saying, Miss Ambersley?" he prompted her. "I said it's the reason there are so few passengers aboard. This is the only occupied passenger deck. I'm told that above us in storage, and above that is the second-class deck. But that is not entirely unoccupied. All the staterooms, you see, are full of food, vegetables mainly. Imagine, tons and tons of potatoes and carrots and turnips, just above our heads." Her eyes glittered at the prospect of so many root vegetables. Cabal sensed there was not going to be a meeting of the minds here. At least, it explained Frau Rabarovsky's obscure reference to exploding potatoes. "So, only the first-class deck is occupied? And the crew deck, of course." Harleman raised an interrogative hand. "I say, the crew deck's at the top, isn't it? Along with engineering and such like. Doesn't that make the old bird a bit top-heavy?" Stan had obviously fielded questions like this before. He had his glass to his lips, however, and by the time he could lower it, de Guerre had leapt into the breach. "Yes, monsieur, it does make the vessel top-heavy, but you see, that is the intention. It is an easy error to fall into that an aeroship is much like a nautical ship, and in many respects, especially in how they are run, that is true." He cupped his hand. "An aeroship does not float in a sea of air, however." He twisted his wrist so that his fingers dangled downwards. "It hangs like a chandelier in the heavens. Thus may the good Lord forfend, should any of the levitators fail, that it may lean over a little, and if they were at the bottom and the same thing happened," he shrugged, "it would fall over. Poof." Cabal did not recall ever having heard of an apocalyptic disaster resulting in death and horror characterized as poof. A disciple of understatement himself, he warmed slightly to de Guerre. Captain Sten nodded benevolently. "Couldn't have put it better myself," which was probably true. "How many levitators does a vessel like this carry, Captain?" de Guerre asked. "Oh, strictly speaking, how many levitators carry a ship like this?" replied Sten. Delighted with his wit, he reached once again for his glass. "As you say," said de Guerre, with a sort of smile normally employed in the patronization of idiot children. "How many?" Sten paused, glass halfway to his lips. "Eh?" His eyes wandered in their orbits as he re-engaged his attention. "The levitators? Oh, they're 2 batteries of 8. Parallel or cross-linked?" Cross-linked. Much safer. Much more expensive, too." Sten opened his arms in about as expansive a gesture as he dared without knocking de Guerre and Lady Ninica off their chairs. "She's not exactly a scow, mein Herr." De Guerre nodded. "She is impressive. I wonder, may I see more of her, please?" I'm sorry?" "May I see a little more of her, beyond the doors marked crew only?" Sten paused, uncertain. "Well, it's not company policy to have guided tours. The bridge is not spacious." Please, Captain, I would be deeply obliged. As for the bridge, you need not concern yourself on that. One bridge is much like the other. No, I'd much rather take a look at your engineering section, if I may, just to see how the art has moved on since I retired. Sten wavered. Company rules and reasonable behavior were doing battle within him. The impetus to make his decision one way or another was provided, unexpectedly, by Alexei Casson. "Oh, you might as well, Captain," he said as he chased the last bit of his peas around the plate. "The whole boat's going to be filled with greasy citizens getting their mucky fingerprints over everything, and they won't be saying please. Here Daguerre's a gentleman, at least. Why should they do anything like he can't even have 5 minutes looking at your spinny things upstairs?" Sten ignored the reference to his ship as a boat and said, "It's not that easy, I'm afraid, Herr Casson. I don't want to set a precedent." "Give him his guided tour, Captain," said Lady Ninica in a voice that might have been gifted to her by the Lorelei and a very good elocution teacher. "I, for one, promise not to ask for a similar privilege." "Nor I," added Miss Ambersley, which earned a disdainful glance from Lady Ninica that seemed to say, as if that were likely. "Nor me, neither," said Casson, finally cornering the errant peas and spearing them on his fork amidst a pizzicato of dinner silver on china. There was a general round of muttered agreements. Captain Sten gave in with good grace, and arrangements were made for the following afternoon. For his part, Cabal slightly regretted that he wouldn't get a chance to see the engineering deck for himself. He had an interest in the machinery of the metallic as well as the fleshy form. Casson's long-awaited pudding, dessert, seemed an altogether too feminine term, turned up as the next course. There was a limited choice between the famous Mercarvian dish, shun, which not only sounds like a sneeze, but looks like it, and cheese and biscuits. Almost everybody, even the Mercarvians, opted for cheese and biscuits. The cheese was fierce enough to strip a layer of tissue from the palate, but it was still preferable to the alternative. Cabal, however, had an unlooked-for opportunity to see shun at close quarters, as Casson was the only one to order it. Served in a long, shallow dish, it looked and smelled like partially fermented milk, with an island of something slightly too large-grained to be sago sitting in the middle of it. Scattered across this island was a red stain of blended cinnamon and pepper. Casson tucked into it with noisy enthusiasm. "Put hairs on your chest, this will, old son," he commented to Cabal. Cabal failed to see how this could be regarded as an advertisement, particularly with respect to female diners. Oh, glad you're back, man. Good to see you. You woke up. Finally, they reached the time for coffee, cognac, and cigars. The ladies retired, Miss Barrow giving him a meaningful look as she did so, and the gentlemen wandered down toward the salon. Cabal felt constrained to attend the ritual, but first made his apologies that he would be a few minutes. The same interfering steward who had placed him beside Miss Barrow now directed him to the nearest head, which Cabal understood to be a slang or technical term for the toilet. He thanked the steward, though he had no intention of using it. He just wanted a little time to himself to gather his wits. He made his way instead to the starboard promenade, the better to find some fresh air filtering through the external vents there. The promenades ran down either side of the ship on Deck B, the storage and supply deck. No passengers bunked on this level, so the rooms had no portholes, only thin windows set high in their walls to let in light from the promenades. These were accessible only via stairs from Deck A, first class, at both their fore and aft ends, and ran most of the length of the vessel. Wide glazed windows, angled out in shallow horizontal arc running almost the length of the ship to allow walkers to lean over the rail and gaze down at the hoi polloi without having their hair unduly disturbed. It was a far more scenic route from the dining room to the salon than going via the internal corridor on Deck A, but not nearly as expeditious, and Cabal was unsurprised that none of the other men climbed the stair with him. Such was the lure of coffee, brandy, and tobacco. He was hoping for a few minutes of solitude, but here he was to be disappointed. The petulant Herr Zorak was there, hands on the rail by the windows, deep in thought, though more probable self-pity. He looked up when he heard Cabal turn the corner, denying Cabal the chance to withdraw unseen. It was an awkward situation where neither man wanted to be in the presence of the other, but manners prevailed. Cabal found a place perhaps a meter away from Zorak at the rail and looked out into the night. There was silence for some moments, then Zorak said, "I suppose I made rather a damn fool of myself tonight." "Yes," said Cabal. Zorak shot him a slightly startled look. "You call a spade, don't you? It saves time. I am not noted for my diplomatic skills." "But you're a civil servant?" "But not one in the diplomatic service. I deal in facts, Herr Zorak, and the fact is, yes, you made a fool of yourself tonight." Zorak started to say something, but the will to do so left him in a defeated sigh. He turned back to the window. "I know he's right. That's the worst of it. You can't blame a man for making a bullet if that bullet is later used to kill a saint. I knew that, or I would have, if I'd taken a minute to think. I was just so angry. The desolate suppression, words cannot." He shook his head. "I'm being a fool again." "I am not very politically aware," said Cabal, choosing his words carefully. "In my post, I deal with figures, disbursements, quotas, and reports. Sometimes things happen in the broader world." He gestured at the dark earth beneath them. "And I remain ignorant of them, often to my shame. Herr Zorak, what exactly is the desolate suppression? What did this von Falks do?" Zorak looked at him, an odd look of mild suspicion and surprise, and Cabal wondered if his curiosity was going to cost him dearly. "You live in a sterile, isolated little world, Herr Meisner," said Zorak. "I almost envy you." "Very well. The desolate suppression, history lesson. You probably picked up most of the story from the dinner table. The Gusar Valley was Priskian by the right of Treaty of Holzburg, but the locals have always regarded themselves as culturally Dulkine. They complained about it, and especially the Priskian policy of forcible relocation and the shipping in of Priskian settlers, but nobody was listening, so they started with civil disobedience. But all that got them was a few broken heads and some unjustifiably heavy prison sentences." Cabal frowned. "So this isn't a Mercarvian affair at all?" Zorak shook his head. "Politically, no. But we are all brothers against injustice, Herr Meisner, are we not?" Herr Meisner declined to comment, so Zorak continued. "Civil disobedience escalated to attacks on property, and finally to the derailing of a Priskian troop train. There were a handful of injuries and one death. The Priskians responded by sending in Commodore von Falk's Aero Squadron. He was supposed to monitor activity in the valley only and lend support to ground troops should they request it." He looked in the direction of the dining room in his humiliation. "De Geer was wrong about one thing. I should have pointed it out, small victory that it was. He said the locals slaughtered patrols. That's not true. They attacked one patrol when the Priskians started enforcing a curfew and killed 2 men at the cost of 4 of their own. Farmers against soldiers, hardly a fair fight, but one of the dead Priskians was an officer of von Falk's squadron who had been liaising with the ground troops." The Commodore was furious, insane with anger, quite literally insane. He located the 3 villages that were most likely the source of the terrorist who had killed his officer, and then he closed his eyes and did not speak for several seconds. When he opened them again, he said, "They eradicated all 3 villages, bombed and bombarded them, strafed the streets with Gatling guns, dropped liquid fire on the homes and the farms and the churches. They burnt the houses and shot the people when they ran from the flames. By the time he received orders to cease immediately and withdraw, it was too late. 2,400 people were dead or dying." There was a silence for a dozen heartbeats. 2,400? Cabal's voice was hollow. Zorak nodded. "It was a disaster in many ways. Priskia had little choice but to cede the Gusar back to Dolkis under international pressure. Von Falks was given a revolver with 1 bullet in a quiet room for 10 minutes to give him the opportunity to do the decent thing. which he did. And when the world saw what Daguerre's machines had done to those poor people, he looked Cabal in the eye. Orders went up by 800%. I accept his argument that he didn't design his ships to kill civilians, but that doesn't excuse him getting rich from it, he shrugged. Or am I still being a damn fool? Yes, said Cabal. I'm expected in the salon, Herr Zorich. Good evening. He made to leave, but on the corner he paused and looked back. Humanity is a despicable mess, Herr Zorich, and ill-suited to the compassion of romantics. Sometimes it requires culling. Oh, said Zorich. He sounded worn out and depressed. And who would choose who lives and who dies? I would, ideally, thought Cabal. I'd make a more informed job of it than most, but instead he said, Who indeed, Herr Zorich, and took his leave. Walking into the salon was like entering a fog bank, albeit a very Cuban one. Every man present had a cigar in his mouth and a snifter in his hand containing enough brandy to preserve a mouse. The coffee pots sat by, unloved and unused, as the men stood around in that peculiar chest-out and stomach-sucked-in pose that men in dinner jackets feel obliged to strike after dinner. Cabal had suffered the misfortune of attending several such gatherings before, and was quite sure they labored under a sense of ritual that eroded a great deal of any potential enjoyment to be had. The Mercarvian variety, however, was almost a full-blown dominance display of the sort that gets anthropologists excited. A certain pecking order was already apparent. Captain Sten stood unassailable because he was, after all, the captain, and they were all on his territory. Daguerre had age, experience, fame, and a certain cachet of notoriety about him, and so stood at an only slightly less second place. After that, however, it was every man for himself, with the sole exception of Frau Rabarovsky, who refused to play and stood off to one side, gazing mournfully into his brandy, as if he really did expect a pickled mouse to surface. Currently holding the floor was Bertram Harleman, king of the bar snacks. He had moved on from exhaustive details of the all-conquering pork-scratching and was offering to let the gentleman present in on the ground floor the next breathtaking breakthrough and overpriced tidbits for the Bierkeller market. The white-hot cutting edge was called mixed nuts, and apparently containing the secret weapon of dried fruit. Almonds, he said in a significant tone to one half of the gathering. Raisins, he said to the other. Cabal managed to reduce a full eye roll of his eyes to a momentary interest in the carpet pattern and entered the fray. That's the end of chapter 5. Yeah, so he's on an airship. He hates everything. It's really unfortunate. Next chapter fun starts, though. Yeah, you made it for the ending. Yeah, well, we still have another chapter to go, too, so. So much food talk, and all the food is disgusting. All the food sounds terrible. Although, I will admit, cow's postmortem is the best thing you could call an undercooked steak. And I'd stand by that. When I first read that, I was like, that's what I'm calling it now. That's all it is. That's the best thing I've ever heard. Yeah. So, how are we all feeling after that awkward dinner? Loved it. I'm not gonna lie, the second one is the hardest for me to get through just because all the people and all the conversations. I remember reading it. It was giving me secondhand anxiety that I'm not even experiencing. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I've been in something like this awkward dinner before, and it's the most terrible thing. And I just felt like I was reliving it. I'm like, this is just Thanksgiving. Like, this is Thanksgiving where you don't know any of the people. Like, that's all it is. It's terrible. Yeah, no. Who here has been in a really awkward dinner where shit like that happens? I have. It's terrible. Oh yeah. I was like, oh no. This is a really bad family reunion. That's what this is. I hate this. No. Yeah. The only thing that makes it worse is if, like, someone's family had cooked all that. You know what I mean? Like, I've been to bad dinners before where also they have made the food and it's terrible. You know? Oof. Thank you for the compliment on my makeup. I worked hard on it. Family potluck style. I mean, potluck style isn't bad because then at least at least one or two people know how to cook whatever they're fucking making. You know what I mean? You can count on that. But it's kind of a free for all. But I hate, like, I don't even like going out to dinner most of the time anyway, just with people that I like. Like, I just get anxiety going out. But put me in an awkward situation where I either don't know the people or don't know them very well. Oof. No, I hate it. I can't stand fancy dinners either. Yeah, these are contacts. Yeah. Yeah, I would get secondhand anxiety every single time I read that chapter. Not gonna lie, every single time I read it, I'm like, oh, I remember how awkward this dinner is. And there's also that's not even the last one. You want to get a really awkward one? There's a few chapters from now, we're gonna get another really awkward, like, afternoon tea. That's the most awkward thing you've ever read. Like, both with the amount of shit. You ever walk away from a conversation and you're like, well, that was really weird. And then later you're like, oh, I suddenly understand the underlying motive for this conversation and it's terrible. That happens. And the entire chapter is just that. And you're just like, that was kind of weird. And then later it's like Cabal has that and he's like, well, that was a strange discussion. And then Leonie was like, do you really not know what that was? And he was like, oh no. Like, it's that. I hate feeling like that. Whenever I walk away from a conversation and I'm like, well, that was a weird lunch, you know, like, I didn't know what was really happening there. And then later you're like, oh, I hated that. Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't have to stop midway through and be like, hold on, guys, I'm just going to shake it out. Just kind of make my fingers not itchy. And then we also have, like, another weird... this is just a series of, like, unfortunate conversations for Cabal and various food, like, related activities. Like, he goes to the bar, has a really awkward conversation. Tries to have tea, has a really awkward conversation. Tries to eat breakfast, really awkward conversation. And every single time, he's just like, I am not cut out for this. Like, every single time. And so this whole book should just be titled Cabal is Really Bad at Socializing. Because that's what this book... There's more to it than that, I'm joking. That's hyperbolic. But there are a couple really awkward conversations where I'm just like, oh, that gives me anxiety. This book gives me the most anxiety out of all of them. But I hope you all are enjoying it. It's almost secondhand, like, embarrassment style, where you all can listen to it and you're like, oh my god, this is terrible. And some people like that, you know what I mean? So I hope that you're enjoying it. We get into the thick of it At the end of this chapter, I believe, is when the fun starts. That, and I'm going to start doing some cool, terrible sicknesses. Oh, jeez. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, if you need to rest, we understand. This will all be up on YouTube for you to peruse later at your leisure. You want to be here? Should I go ahead and start chapter 6 then? If you want to catch the beginning of it? Should I? I thought we could pause for a hot minute, but if you want me to go ahead and start it. Second date update segments are radios. That seems like it would be like secondhand embarrassing. 6. Okay. Go ahead. Alright. I'll do it. I'll go ahead and start reading. I don't know. I'm good. I took my pause. I got my water. I got my water, got my vape, got everything I need. I'm good to go. We'll go ahead and jump right in then. Chapter 6, in which death occurs and curiosities are noted. Cabal slept lightly. This was as much a learned behavior as a natural aspect. Far too many people and other entities had trod lightly towards him as he slept with less kindly intentions than tucking him in and kissing his brow. He skimmed through the dreaming edges of deep sleep like a man on ice skates, standing rigid, arms crossed, and wearing a disapproving expression, as his subconscious mind threw phantasms, childhood memories, and random elements of his recent past in his path with more optimism than expectation. He slid through them all with the humorless gravitas of an Old Testament prophet challenged to a magical duel by Uncle Mungo, the children's conjurer. When he did finally reach the places of the mind too dark and motionless for dreams, he paused, barely over the tree line, and waited for his body and his mind to recuperate, all the time listening to the distinct call of his senses, singing like the wind over telegraph wires. If they suddenly cried with pattern and purpose, he could be up and out of the well of sleep faster than a rabbit from a trebuchet. Whoa, why? From a bucket. Read that wrong. From a trebuchet. Tonight he had taken almost an hour to drift off, even into a light slumber, and was just in the act of strapping on his figurative skates when something roused him back to full wakefulness. He did not sit bolt upright. There's nothing like visibly declaring oneself awake to precipitate an attack. Instead, he lay, his eyes opening only slightly as he took in his surroundings, and listened carefully. The steady thrum of the levitators he had grown accustomed to, and this he ignored. This was something else, however. A dull, battering sound running through the outer hull as if somebody was kicking the wall. After a moment more, it ended, and there were only the sounds of the ships running. Yeah. Man, I misread that, and I was like, why did you say that? You know how to pronounce things. Trebuchet, what the fuck is wrong with you? Cabal rolled onto his back and gazed at the... Now I'm making up letters. Gazed at the ceiling as he wondered what had made the noises. It was, he knew, largely an exercise to bore himself back to sleep. He had no inkling of the workings of a vessel like the Hortense. For all he knew, the sound might be a common occurrence, made by some necessary component doing its job. There had been something about it, though, something organic rather than mechanical. He had heard dying men drum a similar tattoo on the floorboards with their heels, and this thought shooed sleep away. 5 minutes later, there was a new sound, and at this Cabal did sit bolt upright. It was a dull roar that grew in a rapid crescendo to a climax that coincided with a sharp metallic thud. Cabal had heard a sound very similar to it earlier in the evening when the siding windows in the salon were drawn back. But then they had been flying lower and slower. The window in one of the nearby cabins had been drawn back, he was sure of it, and this raised two objections in his mind. First, that the cabin would now be bitterly cold as the wind blew harshly around it. Second, that when he had been looking from his own window earlier in the evening, he noted in passing that the sliding frame was locked shut by a bolt that would require a specialist tool to release. These two factors seemed to indicate that whoever had opened the window had done so purely not for a breath of fresh air. Cabal sat in the darkness, his hands clasped, his index fingers extended and tapping rapidly together as he fought his curiosity. It was an anomalous sound, and as a scientist, anomalies intrigued him. Warring with his curiosity, however, was his instinct for self-preservation. If something was awry, and he was strongly inclined to think so, then wandering the ship's corridors might provoke suspicion. And this was something to be vigorously avoided. Then again, if he didn't investigate something that should have induced him to wander about in Meisner's unforgivably gaudy Chinese dressing gown, wouldn't that also be cause for questions? Why didn't you go out to discover the source of this strange sound, Herr Meisner, as any true-born son of Mercarvia would? He imagined the captain asking him. Because I slept through it, he imagined himself replying, and pleased with this simple but effective excuse, he settled back down to sleep. Whereupon there was a commotion in the corridor, talking for a minute, and the sound of one of the neighbors' doors being knocked upon, apparently without effect. A few moments later it was joined by a light but insistent knock at his own door. Cabal was wondering whether he could reasonably say that he'd slept through this too, when it was repeated with more vigor, and he knew he was going to have to show his face. "Good grief," said Leonie Barrow when he answered the door. "Where on earth did you get that dressing gown?" She herself was wearing a red and blue tartan gown over a white winceyette nightdress. In purely aesthetic terms, her nighttime apparel made Cabal wonder how the English ever managed to find sufficient motivation to breed. "How may I help you, Fräulein?" he said, ignoring her question. "Didn't you hear anything?" He drew breath to say he had slept through it, but changed his mind. "I heard something." He looked out into the corridor and saw Colonel Constantine, the Rabarovskys, and, inevitably, Casson milling around outside Daguerre's door. "What's happening?" "I heard some of the commotion coming from Monsieur Daguerre's cabin. Well, we all did." She waved at the other passengers. "Now it sounds like he's got his window open somehow." "Has anybody called for the officer of the watch?" He was answered by the arrival of Captain Sten himself, still buttoning his uniform collar. "Ladies and gentlemen, kindly step back. I am sure there is nothing amiss." He made to knock on the door, but Casson said, "You're wasting your time there, Captain. I've been knocking until my knuckles are red raw." Cabal noted that they plainly were not. "There's no answer, just the wind. Woo! You know what? I bet he's done himself in." He crossed his arms and looked both pleased and expectant, as if he anticipated that everybody would applaud his deduction and go back to bed. Mystery solved. The captain gave him a look that verged on hostility and knocked sharply on the door. "Monsieur Daguerre, this is the captain. Are you all right, sir?" "You won't get an answer, Capitano," said Casson. Irritatingly, he was right. Captain Sten listened for a moment, but all of them could hear was the moaning wind beyond the door. Sten grasped the door handle and tried it, but it did not yield. He took a master key from his jacket pocket, unlocked the door, turned the handle, and started to open it while beginning an apology for the intrusion. Both the opening and the apology came up short as the door stopped abruptly in its travel. "His body's probably in the way," said Casson, apparently knowledgeable in such things. "Herr Casson," began Sten, his temper almost visibly fraying. Whatever he was about to say was thankfully lost when Colonel Constantine interrupted. "Herr Casson," the colonel said evenly, "please return to your cabin. You are not helping affairs." "Eh?" The possibility of being less than vital in the unfolding events seemed not to have occurred to Casson. "Eh? Me? You can't order me about, matey. I'm not in the army, you know." "Sir," said Sten, his temper reined back in the respite Constantine had bought him. "As the captain of this vessel, you are under my authority. Please return to your cabin." Oh! Casson was outraged by this attack on his dignity. "I have as much right to be here as anyone else." No, said Captain Sten, you don't. He summoned over the purser and a steward who had arrived and were standing uncertainly at the back of the group. Take Herr Casson back to his cabin, steward. Make sure he stays there. Casson was escorted away, still complaining. This is a blinking outrage. I'll write a letter. As you wish, said the captain wearily. He waited until Casson was done before trying the door again. There was a distinct clunk against the handle after the first inch or so, and he could open the door no further. He regarded it grimly. There's a chair under the handle. Monsieur Daguerre, he called through the gap. If you can hear me, please move away from the door. He moved back to give himself space and kicked the door hard with the flat of his boot just under the handle. They heard the chair bounce across the cabin floor, Sten already moving in to follow it. Cabal was slightly surprised to find himself in the doorway a moment after Sten. His curiosity had, not for the first time, overridden his sense of self-preservation. Still, now he was there, it would be more suspicious for him to suddenly become all backwards about coming forward. So he stood just inside the door and looked around officiously, as if inspecting mysteriously empty aeroship cabins in which a chill wind whipped around his naked knees were all part of a Mercavian civil servant's duties. Sten was already by the window, which was slid back along its track as far as it would go. He looked out into the darkness. He's gone, he said, his words almost lost in the howling wind. He shook his head. Stupid, stupid man. He slid the window shut with an angry slam. The sudden silence was almost shocking. How? Said Cabal, wondering how far he could let the uncomfortable persona of Herr Meisner slip in safety. Every degree was a relief. How did he open the window? If it's like mine, it's fixed with a screw. The thought hadn't occurred to Sten. He looked at the window again and seemed nonplussed. He cast his gaze around the room. I don't know, Herr Meisner. The windows can be opened when we are at anchor and in low-level flight, but my crew would have made the rounds of all the cabins and secured the windows when we began to climb. On the bed, he found the answer to this small mystery. A tool wallet lay open, its elasticated straps holding in place the sort of small spanners, screwdrivers, and other devices that a man with an interest in the mechanical might well carry in his luggage. One screwdriver was out of place, lying across its fellows. Beside it was the missing window screw. Sten picked it up and showed it to Cabal. It was never foreseen that a passenger would have both the desire to open a cabin window at high altitude and the means by which to do it, he sighed as he looked at the window. A tragedy. Why did he do it? Constantine had walked past Cabal to stand in the rapidly cluttering cabin. He seemed in perfect equilibrium at dinner. Why would he return here with every appearance of good humor, and then coldly and methodically put an end to himself? Sten shrugged. Dinner was served hours ago. Perhaps he spent that time brooding over something. The man who undid that window may have been a very different composure to the man to whom we bid good night. Constantine was unimpressed. Brooding? Over what? The boy was right. I have dedicated my life to science, and all it has brought is death. The victims of my machines cry out for justice. I shall give it to them. Constantine and Sten turned to Cabal in astonishment. They found him leaning over a portable typewriter on the small writing desk. He was reading from a sheet still in place between platen and paper bale. Cabal turned and looked at the two men. He typed his suicide note. How very modern of him. Sten glared at him. For God's sake, Meisner, a man's dead. He made to remove the sheet from the typewriter. Before he could reach it, however, Cabal tapped a lever on the typewriter's carriage twice smartly, and then tapped a key. He pulled the sheet from the machine himself and regarded it sharply for a moment before handing it over. The inevitable investigation into Monsieur Daguerre's death will no doubt wish you to preserve this as evidence, Captain, he said. Sten was coming to the conclusion that he really didn't like the meddlesome Herr Meisner. What was the point of that, sir? To give the police a comparison. I have repeated the last M of the message, as you can see. We are all witnesses that I typed it on this machine, and even to the naked eye, the two letters seem identical. Believe me, Captain, a thorough investigation would leave no stone unturned and no hypothesis unconsidered, including the possibility that this note was typed on another machine and left here to divert suspicion. What? What? Are you serious, man? The door was locked and barred from the inside. Are you suggesting that the poor man was murdered and then the murderer threw the body out of the window and then himself to follow? I am suggesting it, yes, but not as a serious theory, only as a possibility. There are such things as parachutes, after all. Parachutes! This is a civil vessel, sir. It has no need of parachutes. And before you suggest that this remarkable murderer of yours brought his own aboard, you should understand that we are all traveling in near total darkness over wooded mountains. No one but a lunatic would attempt such a jump. There are such things as lunatics, Captain. Cabal held up his hands to forestall Sten's increasing wrath. Peace, sir. I do not believe for a second that this is the case. While there are certain religious and political groups that encourage a degree of fanaticism in some of their members, that they may be used to as expendable assassins, they are rarely subtle. I see no reason that any such organization would want to kill Monsieur Daguerre and then disguise it as suicide. Miss Barrow. He turned to Leonie, as did Sten and Constantine, both in some surprise that a woman would want to hang around the scene of a death. She, in her turn, demonstrated some discomfort that her silence had not rendered her entirely invisible. I understand from our conversation earlier that you have some interest in psychology. What do you make of all this? The apparent equanimity of Monsieur Daguerre this evening, the abrupt nature of this note. That Cabal did not mention that her interest in such matters was formal and criminological was not lost on her, and so she spoke as an unthreatening dilettante. Well, she started uncertainly, from what I've read on cases like... She gestured vaguely at the cabin in its window. This. There is no standard form. Sometimes there are notes, but, well, there's no rule that says there has to be. And when there is a note, it can be anything from pages and pages long to... less than you'd leave in a note for the milkman. I understand Herr Meisner's wishing to be thorough, but there is nothing here to say that this is anything but what it appears to be. And that is very regretful. I liked Monsieur Daguerre. As did I, my dear, said Constantine. I think we all did. This isn't the place for a young lady. Please, may I accompany you? That won't be necessary, Colonel, interrupted Cabal. I have said my piece and perhaps demonstrated my incompetence for such an investigation. I shall leave this in the hands of the captain, who will surely do a better job of it than I. Good night, gentlemen. I am, of course, at your service if you should need me for a statement or such like. He nodded curtly, to which the colonel clicked his heels, while the captain distractedly bid them farewell. On the way to Leonie Barrow's cabin, Cabal stared at the carpet the whole way, his hands behind his back, thinking. She looked at him, mildly amused. If anybody saw you like that, they'd forget all about us being the ship's lovebirds. You're taking me, unchaperoned, to my cabin, but you look like a man with acute dyspepsia. Cabal was not in the mood for verbal fencing. Daguerre, missing, and in all reasonable probability, dead. Yes? A suicide note, typed. Yes? Brooding over a few featherlight jibes from some boy who's barely started shaving, he types a note, removes a securing bolt from his window, and throws himself into the void. Yes. Cabal walked in silence for another few paces. Do you believe a word of it? No. No, I don't. That business with the typewriter? What were you up to? I told the captain. A letter from that typewriter for comparison. That's something else I didn't believe a word of. You should be careful. I don't think the captain believed you either. Cabal stopped and looked at her. What's this? He said, a bitter mockery evident in his tone. Concerned for my safety? I've explained that once. She kept walking, and after a moment Cabal admitted defeat in his small conflict and followed. All I'm saying is that you should keep your head down, if you want to keep it at all. So, the typewriter. I backspaced twice and typed the last letter in Daguerre's note, the M in them. What use is that for comparison? It would have come down in the same place as the original. No, it should have come down in the same place as the original. But it didn't? No, about a 0.5 millimeter to the right and a little more upward. Which means what, exactly? That the note was typed, removed, and then replaced? Why would Daguerre do that? If Daguerre did it at all, and even if he did not, why would this hypothetical expendable assassin do it? They had reached Leonie's cabin and paused by the door, speaking in hushed tones. We believe he was murdered, then? She whispered. I don't believe in hypothetical expendable assassins, with or without parachutes. Unless we can come up with a reasonable explanation of how a murderer got out of a locked and barricaded room, we're just going to have to accept that it was suicide, no matter how wrong that seems. There was something of the caged animal about Cabal, she thought, as she waited for a reply. He was angry and frustrated, and that he had been presented with a problem that intrigued him, but that engaging that problem might lead to his exposure, arrest, and execution. She could almost feel sorry for him. But this was Johannes Cabal, a man she knew from bitter experience was more than capable of monstrous acts of violence and cruelty when necessary. Then again, he was also the man who had sent her a letter and document of such astonishing and liberating power that it had made her father, a man of great imperturbability, sit down and repeat, "Well, I'll be buggered," for the better part of a minute. Whatever was going on inside Cabal's mind currently, he did not seem in the mood to share. "Good night, Miss Barrow," he said finally, and walked away, drawing his ridiculous oriental dressing gown tight. Leonie watched him through narrowed eyes, shook her head, and retired for what was left of the night. Cabal got back to his cabin, closed the door heavily, dumped the horrendous dressing gown on the floor, and threw himself into his bed with a muttered expression of irritation with the world. He just wanted to go back to sleep. He did not want to become any more involved in the curious case of the defenestrated Daguerre than he already was. Indeed, if he could avoid any further entanglements, he would be a happy man. A happier man, at least. He was determined to roll over, make himself comfortable, forget all about the night's events, and go to sleep. He managed exactly half of this list. After rolling over and making himself comfortable, he discovered that he was just comfortable enough to consider the night's events in detail, and in so doing drove away any hope of sleep. He was in that awkward place where rationality and logic don't quite match up, and the horrible squealing of misaligned mental cogs was driving him to distraction. Pure brute logic said the door was locked and barricaded, the window was open, and the cabin offered no hiding places. Therefore, the occupant of the cabin had gone out of the window. Pure brute logic overruled any silly murder shenanigans by pointing out the suicide note in the locked room, and then proceeded to wave Occam's razor around in a threatening manner. Rationality, however, is a slightly different beast, or at least Cabal's was. It considered the curious facts of Daguerre's good humor at dinner, the curiosity of the misaligned suicide note, and, damn it, the chair. Cabal sat up in bed, thinking hard. Why had Daguerre barricaded his door at all? The door was already locked. Even if opening the window turned out to be a noisy operation, by the time a member of the crew bearing a master key arrived to open the door, he would long since have completed his unsuccessful impersonation of Peter Pan and become an untidy mess in the Mercarvian wilderness. To protect against, or at least slow any attempt to kick the door down, Sten had dislodged the chair with a single well-placed kick, but the captain was a big man. Anybody else would have taken longer to get through, and that was what Daguerre had planned upon. There, it was satisfactorily explained. No, it wasn't. It was overplanned. Once the window was open, it was the work of a moment to climb out into eternity, unless he ended up dithering before the jump. No, that wouldn't do either. That meant he had planned for time spent dithering, which meant he expected to be unsure, or at least anticipated the possibility of being unsure, in which case he was unsure of committing suicide, in which case, Cabal growled with irritation, in which case, why had he committed suicide? People don't set out to kill themselves and then make contingency plans lest they change their minds. It was a stupid circular argument, so he returned to the point of departure. Why had Daguerre barricaded his door? Cabal looked around for a new path to follow, one that didn't curve so alarmingly, but was to be disappointed. He slumped back down and tried to sleep. At first, his slowing conscious mind was naive enough to believe that his subconscious was helping him to drift off. It presented him with a vision of limitless plain of tiles beneath a sterile white sky. The tiles were marked on each edge with a letter, A, B, C, D, to indicate orientation, and some mathematical symbols were scrawled across the center. He half-heartedly attempted to read one, but the notations squirmed beneath his gaze, and it seemed too much work to force them to stay still. He was fairly sure that there was something to do with topology, and that was enough for him. Topology was not one of his favorite branches of mathematics. Instead, he went for a walk, feeling the reassuring touch of pure warm shag pile scientific logic beneath his bare feet. There was little to look at except for the tiles, so he watched them pass beneath him as he strolled, enjoying the swirling patterns of notation on their surfaces, enjoying the regularity and the... Something stabbed his foot. He hopped sideways, swearing with surprise. One of the tiles was not flush with the others, and had gnashed his foot. The tiles didn't feel warm and woolly anymore, but cold and hostile. His blood was scattered in scarlet drops across the offending tile, shining like rubies. As he watched, the notation joined with his blood and formed new shapes. But later he realized that the writing was not entirely topographical. It was too late now, though. All around him, tiles were rising to reveal that they were in fact the top faces of cubes. All but the one that had cut him. That one grew and expanded, and he could see extra dimensionality within it. A tesseract. He tried to name its 4 dimensions. He felt he had to, but they came out wrong. This cube had the dimensions of height, length, width, and significance. It grew and grew until he was in its skeletal shadow, the white sky warped in its core. Cabal awoke suddenly from a light slumber, sweating angrily, and with a phantom pain in his foot. He was angry at himself for looking and not seeing, angry at his unconscious mind's infuriating habit of telling him things in the most obscure way possible, and angry at circumstances for putting him in the wretched situation. He could investigate the potential clue he had just perceived, but he knew that he shouldn't. He managed to resist his curiosity for the best part of 4 minutes. It was now over 2 hours since the discovery of Daguerre's disappearance and probable death. The corridors were quiet again, and the muttered conferences from his fellow passengers speculating about the night's events had long since died away. Cabal wrapped the dressing gown around himself again, and his phantasmically injured foot still fresh in his memory, put on Meisner's slippers. He looked up and down the corridor, but it was silent and empty. Satisfied that he was alone for the moment, he turned his attention downwards and started walking towards Daguerre's cabin. The dark red carpet marked with a black pattern was not made up of a single roll at all. Instead, the ingenious Markarvians had used individual squares of carpet. The practicality of being able to easily replace damaged or constrained sections without the necessity of recarpeting great lengths of corridor was not lost on Cabal. Not now was the significance of his dream. Tesseract sounds a great deal like tessellate, at least to an overactive unconscious mind. There are 17 groups of tessellation with translational symmetry in 2 dimensions. The pattern woven into the identical carpet squares used group PMG, which reflects in only one direction. Therefore, if a tile is placed incorrectly, it breaks the pattern. The pattern was a complex one, wrought in one dark color upon another, if one regards black as a color. In the normal run of things, it might have been months before an error was noted, if it ever was. Between Cabal's eye for order and the analytical qualities of his unusual mind, it had been discovered within a few hours. A few hours because Cabal was positive the carpeting had been perfect before. Yet, now, He stopped and knelt just around the corner from Daguerre's cabin. One square had been lifted and replaced incorrectly. Why was that? It was obvious that the pattern had been disrupted, if only one took a moment to examine it properly. The unmistakable conclusion was that it had been replaced in a hurry, and there had been no time to check. The square was well tamped down, and Cabal was frustrated to find that he couldn't lift it. A brief trip back to his cabin, and he returned with a switchblade. It was the work of seconds to insert the tip of the knife beneath the square's edge and lift it out. Beneath was a bed of underlay. Unlike the carpet, this seemed to be continuous, yet he could make out a neat cutting running through close to the edge of the exposed area. Cabal lifted more carpet squares and revealed that a square section of underlay, perhaps 70 centimeters along an edge, had been cut. It didn't look to be a hurried job, and when he lifted the loose square of underlay, he saw that it had probably been done when the flooring was originally laid. A maintenance hatch lay in the area he had cleared, a ring in its surface ingenuously flush, with only a small space to insert a fingertip and flip the ring. It had probably been done when the flooring was originally laid. A maintenance hatch lay in the area he had cleared, a ring in its surface ingenuously flush. He disliked extemporized activities, not least because going without preparation usually meant being unprepared, and as he lowered himself into the darkness of the ducting that lay beneath the open hatch, he reflected that there are better ways to explore a mysterious dark place than without a torch, and naked but for a Chinese dressing gown and a pair of slippers. Giving himself the assurance that he would not go far, he shuffled along on all fours. The duct almost immediately reached a T-junction. He gauged that turning left would take him beneath the corridor on which Daguerre's cabin lay, so that was the way he went. The light filtering down through the open hatch behind him dimmed sharply as he took the corner, and for the next 2 or 3 meters he crawled forwards in deep gloom. Thus he felt, rather than saw, something unusual in the duct. The slightly flexible sheet metal became suddenly rigid, and feeling around, he realized that he had discovered yet another hatch, locked shut at its 4 corners by rotating catches connected to small handles. He gripped one of the handles, gave it an experimental turn, and felt a catch disengage. He did the same to one of its neighbors, and felt that side of the hatch drop slightly until it came to rest on something. He guessed that the hatch would have a lip around its edge to prevent it simply falling through once all 4 catches were opened, because, unless he was very much mistaken, he had a very good idea what was on the other side of it, and dropping the hatch would be inconvenient at the very least. He released the last catch, lifted the far edge of the hatch, and pushed it away from him so that it lay on the duct floor on the far side of the opening. Then he crawled back a little and gingerly pushed the near edge of the hatch away from him to reveal what lay beneath. It was Mercarvia, some 4,000 feet below him, and barely visible in the early morning darkness. A cold wind blew up through the hatch and made him shiver, suddenly very aware of how ridiculously unprepared he was. Extemporization. Puh! He spat mentally on the concept. Here he was, woefully under-equipped to carry out any sort of detailed investigation, without light or notebook, and cold. Very, very cold. Still, he was here now, so he should make the most of it, although he had little idea of what he hoped to find. The duct didn't run beneath Daguerre's cabin, with a convenient hatch to give the hypothetical assassin an escape route. He felt around for anything suspicious, but there was nothing. The duct's main function seemed to be to carry assorted cables and pipes around the ship, with ventilation possibly a secondary task. There were a couple of sturdy metal handles mounted on either side of the opening, although they struck him as more likely to be used as mounting for ladders during maintenance than as rungs to hold when engineers climbed through here. He reached down and felt around the outer skin of the Princess Hortense, but found very little to excite his attention. Well, it had seemed an interesting avenue of inquiry when all it was dreamscapes and hypercubes, but now that it had been reduced to freezing in a tin tunnel, Cabal felt it had lost some of its allure. He pulled his arm back inside and backed up a little to allow himself room to pull the hatch into position, except that he couldn't back up a little. Something was in the way. And by the time he realized that something was actually somebody, it was much too late. His knees squealing against the steel floor of the duct, he was bodily shoved forward. He tried to scramble across the other side of the open hatchway, but a hand came down in the small of his back and pushed him forcefully down. As he fumbled, looking for some way to pull himself clear, one knee dropped over the edge of the gap, and Johannes Cabal fell out of the hatch. And that's the end of chapter 6. Where's my bookmark? I don't want it. That's the end of chapter 6. Yep. That's the end of chapter 6. So, yeah. But, isn't it interesting? Yeah, no, he does not have pants on. It does address it. Literally, cliffhanger. Anyway, yeah, he doesn't have pants on. He's in a dressing gown that isn't his. And he's hanging out of the underside of an airship, and no one knows where he is. And he doesn't know who pushed him. I told you there would be one. I was like, man... You're gonna miss the next one. You'll have no idea what happens. Oh, shit. Well, if it's any consolation, the fact that there are 3 more books after this kind of takes the wind out of the sails a little bit. It undermines the operation by knowing that there's 3 other books and they're all named after him. So, he'll be fine. But I can understand the frustration. You're busy with school and shit. You can always put them on YouTube later. You don't have to be in the live, man. I get it. I feel it. He is going to be a bit cold. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's freezing. They've established. He's freezing. That sounds terrible. God, just not even taking into account the climate. You're 4,000 feet in the air. You're in a dressing gown. And I don't know why, but I think of Mercarvia as sort of like Russia. Maybe that's wrong of me. I do, though. And I feel like it'd be freezing. He has his slippers. Not for long, man. They're slippers. They're gonna fly off. It's not great. Oh yeah, hard to breathe. More like Germany. There is a Germany, though, in the story. They're from Germany. So the fact that he's not familiar with any of the culture, it prevents me from thinking of it as German. Austria, that's also an option. I took like Catamedia to be more like an Austria, but I don't know. It's just the way my brain is working. Austria does feel kind of right, though. I could see it as like an Austrian sort of thing. I refuse to do the accents either, so that's why I'm just leaving it open for interpretation. Also, not offending anybody. I'm not gonna butcher someone else's. No, Georgia. That just makes me think of the Community joke. Anybody else seen Community? The country, Troy. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not doing any accents. Apart from just differentiating from the characters. Balkan area would make sense. Yeah, I can see that. And then, Sensa I took to be more of like Spain, but that you'll see they get to Sensa. Obviously, the book has to end. So, I don't know. So it's up. They're all fictional countries, so technically they could be. There's definitely influences of different things, but like you can interpret it as a lot of different places. But we already know that England is its own place and Germany is established as its own place. And then it's like he just made up this whole other area as like part of his map, which I think is kind of cool. I like that he incorporated actual, like, geography into it and then just slipped his own in there. He just took our map and was like, I'm just gonna make a whole country. Totally fine. Do whatever. Man, Fear Institute is gonna be great. For anybody who liked the fantasy stories with maps on the inside of the cover, you're gonna love Fear Institute. Fear Institute is one of my favorites. It's probably also like weirdly the most frustrating. Especially when you first read it. If you haven't read Fear Institute, wait for it. If you have, that's fine. But if you haven't, don't finish Fear Institute before we get there. Because I like experiencing it with you guys who don't read ahead. And y'all are like, oh my fucking god. I'm like, yeah. Yeah, I like it. But Fear Institute, I would like to experience with it, like, experience it with many different people who haven't read it. Oh, you are the witch. I love her. Yeah, if you're at Fear Institute, go ahead and stop for a hot second. But, damn. So, Thorny, if you're at the witch, it means you've read the beginning of Fear Institute. And if you've only reached the witch for the first time, well, I say the first time, she's mentioned, but like, you only meet her once in the book, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop right there. But what is your plan for cats, Thorny? I'd love to know your plan for cats before we get off here. Oh, noted. Glad you're experiencing it in real time, Crimson. Really appreciate that. You have nothing finalized yet? Okay. This is not helping. Look. Just come up with a plan for cats for me. And then we'll get there. We'll get there when we'll get there and we'll get there together. And y'all are gonna love it. That and, like, I am also the kind to, like, drag out books that I don't want to finish right away. Especially if I'm really enjoying it. Because I'm also just like, when I start really enjoying something, I understand in my heart of hearts, soul of soul, that I'm going to be so depressed when it's over. Because I'll have no idea what to read. And logically, I know I have plenty to read. I have so many books over here that I could start on. But it's not that book. It's not the one I just finished. And if it's not going to be another book like that, I get upset at the book that I'm going to read. I have to give it a mo. I have to, like, stop, slow down, and be like, okay, I can't start this book yet. I gotta decompress, because otherwise I'm gonna be mad at this new book. It didn't do anything to me. But I will immediately and instinctively hate it, because it is not what I just read. The book hole. Don't call it that. Why did I say that out loud? I'm not calling it that. We gotta come up with a better name. Don't call it the book hole. Don't call anything the book hole. New request. Yeah, so like, I kind of want you all to enjoy this ride as long as possible. So, or at least that's what I do when I read something that I really like. I'll like space it out. And it's really bad, because Danky will ask me, he'll be like, hey, you finished the book yet? Did you finish that book that I recommended to you yet? And I'm like, no, I'm taking it slow. You gotta stop blasting through content. I'm taking it nice and slow. I want to enjoy this. You got The Troop. Oh, The Troop is so good. Sorry. What are you sorry for? What? The book hole. Oh, you're sorry for the book hole. I was wondering if I missed something. Show you my purgatory shelf. That's a good word for it. Book purgatory. Yeah, I have a purgatory shelf. I'm glad you said that, actually. But yeah, I want y'all to like enjoy this ride for as long as you get it, because it's gonna be a fun one. And I don't think there's ever gonna be any more made. There might be other short stories, but I doubt there's ever gonna be a whole other book of this series. It wraps it up pretty conclusively. You're a spy, you haven't been noticed. It kind of undermines your position if you state that you haven't been noticed. Obviously implying that you wish to be noticed. I'm noticing you. I'm perceiving you, Finn. If that wasn't your intention, then you better slink out now. Everyone noticed, Finn. Well, this has been fun. And you know what? Next week we're back on regular schedule. Well, we're back on technically this week regular schedule, but hopefully I'll be in cosplay next week. If I can get this wig sorted out. Anyway. But yeah, so we get to find out what happens next time. Sorry to leave you on a cliffhanger, but you get to just I'm serious. If you all can guess who did it, because I'll go ahead. I'll give you some hints if you want them, but I kind of suspected the entire time, but then discarded my theory. And then when I got to the end, I was like, damn it. I did the same thing. I did. You'll see. But if you want to come up with a theory and tell me your theory, if you have not read ahead, if you have read ahead, don't spoil it. And if you have not read ahead and you want to share your theory with me, definitely do that, because I'm interested in what you all think is happening. But excited. Anyway, I gotta get off here, because we're actually leaving really early tomorrow to go do some shit. So I have to, go prepare for tomorrow. I have to pack a bag and do all this shit. But I will see you all next week, and I'll probably be a little bit more active on the Discord. Never mind, I didn't mention any Discord. There is no Discord. Stop talking about the Discord. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this story time. If you want to enjoy the next one and follow along with us, you can always catch up on what you missed on the YouTube. Link is in the TikTok bio. And you can also catch me next Tuesday at 8 Central. And we'll pick up where we left off. If you can't make it, don't sweat it. I know some of the regulars have got shit to do next week. But I appreciate y'all being here. And y'all have a good night.